My mom sold our childhood home. Without telling me, what I found inside changed everything. A story by the American Heartbeat Channel. The call came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in March, the kind of hour when bad news wears no disguise. I was already awake, staring at the cracked ceiling of my studio apartment in downtown Denver, nursing a lukewarm beer and wondering how I'd make rent next month. When my phone lit up with my mother's name, I felt the familiar knot in my stomach. The one that had been there since I was 12 years old, and she told me Dad wasn't coming home from the hospital. "Jake," she said, her voice thin as morning fog over the Mississippi. "I need you to come to St. Louis. There's something you need to see." "Ma, it's 4 in the morning. What's wrong?" A pause. The kind of pause that stretches like a rubber band about to snap. "I sold the house on Maple Street," she said. "Closing's in 3 days. I need you to come clear out your old room before the new owners move in." I sat up so fast the beer bottle rolled off the arm of my couch and shattered against the hardwood. "You what?" "The house, Jake. I sold it. I didn't think you'd care. You haven't been home in 6 years." 6 years. She made it sound like I'd abandoned her, like I hadn't called every Sunday at 4 o'clock sharp, like I hadn't sent her half my paycheck every month to help with the mortgage after Dad died. 6 years since I'd walked out that front door with a duffel bag and a heart full of anger I couldn't name. "Why didn't you tell me?" My voice cracked like the old plaster walls of that house. "Because I knew you'd try to stop me," she said quietly. "And I couldn't let you. Not this time." The line went dead. I drove 14 hours straight through Kansas, fueled by black coffee and the kind of rage that keeps you awake better than any amphetamine. I crossed the Missouri state line at sunset, the gateway arch rising against a bruised purple sky like a promise nobody intended to keep. Maple Street hadn't changed. The same cracked sidewalks where I'd learned to ride a bike. The same ancient oak tree Mr. Henderson still hadn't trimmed, its branches scraping against the power lines like skeletal fingers. The same porch swing where Sarah Mitchell had kissed me on prom night, her lip gloss tasting like strawberries and rebellion. But the house, our house, looked different. Smaller somehow, like a memory shrinking in the rearview mirror. The white paint was peeling worse than I remembered. The shutters hung crooked, begging for mercy. A for sale sign leaned in the front yard, the sold banner slapped across it like a verdict. My mother stood on the porch in her faded blue housecoat, the one she'd worn since I was a kid. She was 63 now, her hair more silver than brown, her shoulders curved like question marks. She looked so small against the frame of that house, like a bookmark forgotten in a story that had ended long ago. "You came," she said. Not a question, a statement of fact, tinged with something that might have been relief or might have been dread. "You gave me a choice?" She didn't answer, just turned and walked inside, leaving the door open behind her. The smell hit me first. That particular alchemy of old wood, lemon polish, and something uniquely home that no candle company has ever successfully bottled. I stood in the foyer and felt 12 years old again, dropping my book bag by the stairs, hearing Dad call from the kitchen that dinner was ready. But Dad wasn't in the kitchen. Dad was in the cemetery on Lindell Boulevard, 6 feet under a headstone that read, "Beloved, husband and father," in letters that grew greener with moss every spring. "Your room's the same," Mom said from the living room doorway. "I haven't touched anything. The new owners want to renovate the whole place, so take what you want, leave what you don't." She wouldn't meet my eyes. That was new. My mother had always been a woman who looked you dead in the face when she delivered bad news, when she grounded you for failing algebra, when she told you that your father had stage 4 pancreatic cancer and maybe 3 months if they were lucky. Why, Ma? Why now? Why without telling me? She finally looked at me then, and I saw something in her eyes I didn't recognize. Not guilt, not defiance. Something softer, something scared. Because it's time, Jake. Because some things need to end so other things can begin. Because… She stopped, pressed her lips together. Just go look in your room. Please. Then we'll talk. She turned and walked toward the kitchen, her slippers shuffling against the hardwood in a rhythm I'd know anywhere. The soundtrack of my childhood, of midnight glasses of water, of her checking on me when she thought I was asleep. I climbed the stairs. My bedroom door stuck like it always had, requiring that specific hip check I'd perfected at 14. The room beyond was a time capsule. Posters of bands I couldn't name anymore. A desk covered in dust and old comic books. The twin bed with the navy comforter I'd slept under until the morning I left for college in Boulder. But something was wrong. The closet door stood open, and I could see that the floor inside had been disturbed. The old carpet was peeled back, revealing the plywood subfloor. In the center of that exposed wood sat a metal box, the kind people use for important documents, the kind with a combination lock. I knelt down, my knees popping in the silence. The box wasn't mine. I'd never seen it before. And there, taped to the top, was a yellowed envelope with my name written in my father's handwriting. Jacob, if you're reading this, then your mother finally did what I asked her to do. She was supposed to give you this box on your 25th birthday. I'm sorry she waited so long. I'm sorry for a lot of things. The combination is your mother's birthday. She never could remember it, but you always could. You were always the one who remembered the important things. My hands shook as I dialed the numbers. 0314, March 14th. The day she met my father at a St. Louis Cardinals spring training game. The story she told me 100 times. The story I'd stopped wanting to hear around the time I turned 16 and decided my parents were just ordinary people who'd made ordinary mistakes. The lock clicked open. Inside the box, wrapped in oilcloth, was a leather journal. Not just any journal. My father's handwriting filled every page, cramped and slanted, the pen pressing so hard in places that the paper wore thin. I opened to the first page and felt the world tilt beneath me. March 14th, 1998. I met with Dr. Chen today. The test results are back. I have Huntington's disease, the genetic kind. My mother had it, though we never talked about it. She died when I was too young to understand why she shook, why she forgot my name, why she laughed at things that weren't funny. I have maybe 15 good years, maybe less. I need to make them count. I dropped the journal like it was burning. Huntington's, I'd heard of it. A neurodegenerative disease. Genetic. Hereditary. The words crashed together in my head like cars on an icy highway. I picked it up again, my fingers numb, and flipped forward. June 3rd, 2001. Jake is 5 today. He's perfect. He has my eyes and Margaret's stubbornness. I watch him build block towers, and I wonder if he'll have to watch me fall apart the way I watched my mother. I wonder if he'll inherit this thing inside me, this ticking clock. I can't tell Margaret, not yet. She's pregnant with our second, and the stress. God, the stress could hurt the baby. I'll tell her after. I'll tell them both when the time is right, but he never had. I remembered my mother at his funeral, her face a mask of grief so complete it looked like peace. I'd thought she was mourning. Now I understood she was mourning something else too. The secrets he'd kept, the burden he'd carried alone. I kept reading, the pages blurring. September 12th, 2008. The tremors are getting worse. Margaret suspects something, but I keep telling her it's just stress, just age, just nothing. I'm teaching Jake to drive now. He's 15 and terrified and brave in that way only 15-year-old boys can be. I want to tell him. I want to tell him everything. But what if he has it? What if the test comes back positive and I've poisoned his whole life before it's begun? Better to let him live without knowing. Better to let him hate me for being distant, for being strange, than to make him carry this weight. I love him too much to tell him the truth. Tears fell onto the page, smudging the ink. I wiped them away with my sleeve, angry, so angry I could barely see. November 2nd, 2012. I don't have much time left. The doctors say months, maybe a year. I've arranged everything with Margaret. She knows now. She cried for 3 days, then put on her housecoat and started making phone calls. That's my girl. That's the woman I fell in love with at a baseball game when the world was young. I've put together this box, the journal, my medical records, a letter for Jake explaining why I did what I did, and something else, something I need him to have. Margaret doesn't know about the house. I've been putting extra money away for years, working overtime at the plant, telling her I was saving for Jake's college. I was. But I was also buying something else. I bought the house next door. 1427 Maple. It's in Jake's name. It always has been. When Margaret sells our place, when she finally lets go, he'll have somewhere to come home to. A place that's his. A place without ghosts. I couldn't save him from my genes, but I could give him a home. I sat back on my heels, the journal slipping from my fingers. Through the window, I could see the house next door. 1427 Maple, the Henderson place, the one with the overgrown yard and the broken porch light. The one I'd always thought was abandoned. My mother appeared in the doorway, her face wet with tears she hadn't bothered to wipe away. "He made me promise," she whispered. "He made me promise not to tell you until you were ready. I thought, after college, after you got settled, I thought you'd come home and I'd give you the box and we'd figure it out together. But you didn't come home, Jake. You called, you sent money, but you didn't come home." I was angry, I said, and my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "I thought you didn't need me. I thought you were fine without me." "I sold the house because I couldn't afford it anymore," she said, stepping into the room, her hands twisting in her housecoat. "The medical bills from the end? I never told you how much they were. Your father's insurance barely covered half. I've been drowning for years, and I was too proud to ask for help. Too proud and too scared that if you came back, you'd find out the truth and you'd hate him for keeping it from you." She knelt beside me, her knees cracking in the same way mine had, and picked up the journal. "He loved you so much," she said. "He spent his whole life trying to protect you from this, from the fear. He didn't want you growing up wondering if every headache, every stumble, every bad day was the beginning of the end. Did he ever get tested? I couldn't finish the sentence. Mom reached into the box and pulled out a manila envelope. "He got tested when you were born. You don't have the gene, Jake. He made sure. He paid for the test himself, out of his secret savings. You were negative. He cried for an hour in the hospital parking lot. I found him there when I came to pick him up." She handed me the envelope. Inside was a lab report dated 1993, my name at the top, a string of letters and numbers that meant nothing to me except the final line, highlighted in yellow, negative for CAG repeat expansion. No evidence of Huntington's disease. "I was supposed to give you this on your 25th birthday," Mom said. "But you were in Denver and you sounded so happy, and I thought, what's one more year? What's one more year of not knowing that your father spent his whole life carrying this so you wouldn't have to?" She broke then, really broke, her shoulders shaking with sobs she'd held back for a decade. I put my arms around her, feeling how small she'd become. how much of her had worn away like the paint on this old house, holding everything together through sheer force of will. "I'm sorry," I whispered into her silver hair. "I'm so sorry, Ma." "You don't have to be sorry," she said, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "You just have to come home sometimes. That's all he wanted, for you to have a home to come back to." We sat on the porch swing that night, wrapped in blankets against the March chill, watching the stars emerge over St. Louis. Mom told me everything, the years of secret doctor's appointments, the way Dad had started writing the journal the day he was diagnosed, the way he'd made her promise to wait until I was old enough to understand why he'd hidden the truth. "He thought he was protecting you," she said. "He thought if you knew, you'd spend your whole life waiting for the other shoe to drop. He wanted you to live like you had forever. Because in the end, Jake, none of us know how long we have. The only difference is whether we waste our time being afraid." I thought about my father, about the way he'd taught me to throw a baseball with hands that were already starting to shake, about the way he'd worked double shifts at the plant to save money for a house I'd never known was mine. I thought about fear and love and the impossible calculus parents perform when they try to decide what truths their children can bear. "Tell me about the house next door," I said. Mom smiled, the first real smile I'd seen since I arrived. "It's a mess. Needs new plumbing, new wiring, probably a new roof. Your father bought it at auction for $40,000 in 2005. It's worth 3 times that now, even in its condition. And it's mine? It's been yours since the day you were born. He put it in a trust. He wanted you to have something that nobody could take away. Not creditors, not time, not fear." She reached over and took my hand. "He wanted you to have a place to build a life, even if he couldn't be there to see it." I looked at 1427 Maple, really looked at it, and saw it not as the haunted house from my childhood, but as a promise kept across 15 years of silence. A father who couldn't save himself, but spent his last years ensuring his son would always have a home. "I think I'll stay," I said. "For a while, maybe longer." Mom squeezed my hand. "I'd like that." The closing on 1423 Maple happened 3 days later, as scheduled. I watched from the porch of my father's house as strangers carried boxes into the place where I'd grown up. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. The memories weren't in the walls. They were in my mother's stories, in my father's journal, in the box I'd carried next door and placed on the mantel of a fireplace that needed sweeping but would soon crackle with life. I spent the spring fixing up 1427 Maple, learning plumbing from YouTube videos and making friends with the guys at the hardware store on Grand Avenue. Mom came over every morning with coffee and bagels from the place on the corner that had been there since she was a girl. We talked more in those 3 months than we had in the previous 6 years. On the 4th of July, we sat on my new porch, my father's porch, and watched fireworks over the arch. Mom told me about the time Dad proposed, right there in the stands at Busch Stadium, dropping the ring in her nachos because his hands were shaking even then, 20 years before the diagnosis. "He was always clumsy," she laughed, wiping her eyes. "God, I love that man." "Me too, Ma," I said. "I think I finally understand how much." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we watched the sky explode in red and white and blue, the colors of a country built on second chances and the stubborn belief that tomorrow could be better than today. That was 2 years ago. 1427 Maple Street has a new coat of paint now, forest green with white trim. The porch swing came from the old house. I couldn't leave it behind. Mom lives in the apartment above the garage, independent but close enough that I can check on her. She's teaching watercolor classes at the community center and dating a retired firefighter named Bill, who makes her laugh in a way I haven't heard since I was a kid. I work remotely for a tech company in Denver, but my roots are here now, deep in Missouri soil. I started a nonprofit last year, the Michael Hayes Foundation, providing genetic counseling and financial assistance to families affected by Huntington's disease. We named it after my father, who spent his life hiding in shadows so his son could stand in the light. Sometimes, on quiet mornings, I take out his journal and read a few pages. Not the sad parts, the happy ones. The day I took my first steps. The time I hit a home run in Little League and he cried in the stands. The ordinary Tuesdays and rainy Saturdays and birthday mornings that make up a life worth remembering. He was wrong about one thing, my father. He thought keeping his secret would protect me from fear. But the truth is, fear is just love wearing a mask. And love, real love, the kind that buys houses in secret and writes journals in the dark, that's the only thing that ever really saves us. I still have the box. I keep it in the closet, on the same plywood subfloor where I found it. Sometimes I open it just to look at his handwriting, to remember that I came from someone brave enough to face his own ending so I could have a beginning. The house creaks at night, settling into its foundation like an old dog into a favorite bed. I don't mind. Every sound is a reminder that I'm home, that I have a home, that someone loved me enough to make sure of it, even from beyond the grave. Closing note. Thank you for staying with this story until the end. If it moved you, if it reminded you of your own family, your own secrets, your own second chances, then you're exactly why we tell these stories. Life in America isn't always easy, and the roads we travel aren't always straight. But somewhere between the heartbreak and the hope, we find each other. We find home. If this story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. The American Heartbeat channel brings you real, emotional, deeply human stories every single week. Stories about the families, the struggles, and the quiet miracles that make this country what it is. Stay kind out there. Stay brave. And remember, sometimes the things we fear the most are just love, trying to find its way home. Subscribe for more emotional American stories. Good luck out there, friends. We'll see you next time. American Heartbeat.